Hey everyone, it's time to Nefis and chill, and I'm sure you guys have heard the news already, whether it's from the Discord server or the forums or whatever message board you hang out on for the Elder Scrolls Online news or whatever. But it is official. ZeniMax Online Studios developers have officially stated we're not going to be implementing the light attack and heavy attack changes in Update 26 that were showcased to us players who could test it on an off-cycle PTS. And I'm going to read the announcement to you guys, and then I'm going to go over the announcement. I'm going to go over what this means for us as players in the game and other things. So here we go. Hey gang. First off, thank you all for hopping on the PTS and trying out the changes to light, medium, and heavy attacks. This off-cycle PTS test was designed to give you all a chance to test some experimental changes and let your voice be heard earlier in the development process, which I think is a fantastic idea. This was a new thing for both the team and the community, and overall we think it was very successful. We got a ton of great feedback from those who tested on both the forums and the slash feedback in game. It was great to see all the videos, forum posts, and slash feedback about the various methods of engaging with the core combat mechanics of attacks and varying types of roles and scenarios. There was also a ton of information we gathered tied to core mechanics, classes, progression, and play patterns. It's interesting to note, and this is like the most obvious thing I could have said, just how different the feedback was too. DPS players had different feedback from tanks and support roles, and PvP players had different feedback from PvE players. I mean, the light attack and heavy attack changes are just so massive. It would have affected a lot of things at almost every level. I'm not just talking about classes or food or whatever, class identity. It would have affected every single player, every single class, every single playstyle. And it's not just a matter of high APM players versus low APM players or casuals versus elitists or whatever, but you know, it was also, if you DPS'd, you're gonna have obviously much different feedback compared to a tank or a healer. As a tank, when I tested on the PTS, it was fucking great. It was awesome. And PvP players obviously are gonna have much different feedback from PvE players. I mean, that's a given. Now that we've had a chance to collect and read over all the feedback, we've decided that these changes to light, medium, and heavy attacks will not be included in the Greymoor chapter, Update 26. We will continue to investigate ways to improve on light and heavy attacks to ensure they provide impactful moments where it's an important choice to pick and choose your attacks. Thank you again to all those who participated and tested these changes on the PTS. Your feedback has been invaluable, and we learned a lot. We look forward to your feedback regarding the upcoming chapter, and hope to have more out-of-cycle PTS tests like this in the future. So, biggest takeaways from this. Obviously, the single biggest one, Update 26 or Greymoor patch will not see whatever we saw in the PTS, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the changes, I would highly suggest reading up on the changes, or even going onto the PTS yourself if you have the PTS, or if you want to install the PTS, which is a task. And basically, I'll also leave the link to this in the video description below, so you can read it. Basically, what would have happened had the changes gone through would have been 78% nerf to light attacks. And light attacks would also grant you resources back. While heavy attacks, their damage got buffed, but also their resource return was taken away. And medium weaving would have been the thing again, with how light attacks and heavy attacks and medium weaving would have interacted with off balance, which is also a tricky thing for a lot of people, both on PC and console, who don't have access to a very great visual or audio tell from off balance. But basically, anyway, it would have changed that. They would have also added in several other, changes to item sets and passives, including Werewolf, Blood Moon, Molokina, which was a notable one. The fact that it would reduce the cost of your abilities by 20%, but also reduce your weapon and spell damage. And that ability cost reduction also applied to ultimates. But basically, in my opinion, a lot of these changes were not very encompassing for such a massive change. When they say the light attack and heavy attack changes won't go through, I'm going to assume that all of this is scrapped. Although I kind of disagree with that. But more on that later. Anyway, now a lot of you guys will probably see someone either on the forums or in the Discord server or somewhere else, probably even the comment section down below this video, that this is either, you know, like it's a victory for the elitists, or it's a defeat to the casual players who could have cleared all the content in the world if the light attack and heavy attack changes went through. But honestly, I see it more as a victory for the game. Like, right here they say they hope to have more out-of-cycle PTS tests like this in the future. And, you know, we think it was successful. We got a great ton of feedback. We learned. And I honestly, I wouldn't mind this. The off-cycle PTS test thing would be great. I mean, if they really want feedback early on in the developmental process, that's great news for all of us. Not just for them, but for us as players who can actually test stuff and say, look, this is out of whack, or look, this is a great change. And everybody wins. So this is a victory for the game, not a specific defeat or victory for certain demographics, as some people will probably say. I'm sure someone's already said it. But I can't sugarcoat this either. But I've seen a lot of comments in my previous YouTube video covering these changes, actually. And there's actually a lot of comments saying, I really like these changes. And some people were saying the people who don't like these changes are just trying to keep us from clearing content or, you know, advancing through content. And I'm just like, okay, first of all, everybody, okay, no one cares if you can clear a vet DLC dungeon or not, or or trial or whatever. Secondly, the light attack and the heavy attack changes would not have magically enabled every casual or underperforming player in the perspective the ability to clear all the hardest content in the game. That wasn't just gonna happen. In fact, the light attack and heavy attack changes, a lot of us came to the conclusion that it would have hurt a lot more players, a lot more builds, than it would have helped. Just for an example, guys, bash weaving, or just bashing, was gonna do more damage than light attacking. You tell me how many casual players, or even like the more hardcore players, like bash weaving, or even do bash weaving. I know a lot of endgame players that don't like bash weaving, and I certainly can assure you, no casual player, least of all a beginner, is gonna, you know, bash weave to increase their DPS. Yeah, the fact that they tried to kind of say, okay, we recognize that there's a problem between high APM players and low APM players, or that there's a skill gap. It's fine to, you know, want players to get more involved in content, to push players to saying, hey, you know, the skill gap is too wide. So how can we fix it? And I explained in my previous video that there's so many complicated, you know, there's a complex web of factors as to why there's such a disparity in skill gap. It's not just the fact that light weaving does more damage than heavy attack weaving. There's a whole plethora of issues we can get into in this video, but I won't. You can just check out the other video. But basically what it comes down to is it's just a whole lot of factors, and they just kind of dumbed it down to just light attack and heavy attack damage, which is not, I think, a good way of assessing it and then deciding this is the solution. I think there's going to be a whole series of solutions besides light attack and heavy attacking. And honestly, I do commend them. I do commend the devs for saying, okay, we want more players to take a more active part. We want players to learn more easily. We want the game to feel more intuitive in terms of combat. But this was not, I think, a really good way to go. And, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I don't agree with the fact that they're going to scrap everything. I mean, I think there were a couple, or at least a few good changes that they can probably still go through with. Like the fact that, you know, casting a heavy attack and improving like the delays of heavy attacks and such were improved was a good thing. So for example, on the off-cycle PTS, when you cast a heavy attack, your movement speed no longer gets slowed. Your walking speed remains the same, which I found really awesome. That's a great change. And I think that's another part of why a lot of people don't find heavy attacking very attractive combat-wise, to see your character get not snared or slowed down by other players, but by yourself. I think that was a great change. I think they should get through with that. The fact that they were going to buff heavy attack damage, that's also great, in my opinion. Again, there were also other couple great changes that they can probably still go through with. I hope they go through with it instead of scrapping every single thing. But otherwise, yeah, most of this is going to be rendered obsolete. Yeah, honestly, like a lot of the changes here, or a lot of the things with the change to light attacks and heavy attacks, it would have had massive implications for every level of the game. I'm not just talking about like class identity or whatever, but I'm talking about every single player. PvP, PvE, every class, every spec, every build, food. They would have had to redo everything, pretty much. They would have had to redo item sets. They would have had to redo class passives, class skills. Just to give you guys an example, we actually tested this on the PTS, these changes on the PTS, and one of the people who came along with me was Reborn Zombie, who's another class representative. And she didn't have a Mundus. She didn't have False God for the cost reduction. She didn't have Siphoning attacks, as she was a Magical Nightblade DPS. She didn't have, Incap for the Reeve. She didn't have any, like, anything. She just had damage. And guess what? Her sustain was through the roof. Above 80 to 90% max magical all the time. Just from light weaving. Just imagine that. Not just within the vacuum of what I said, but for everything else in the game. Werewolves. Tank builds. Healers. And again, I do commend the devs for trying to address the gap in the skill between higher APM players and low APM players. But in the context of the performance of ESO right now, plus the fact that a lot of people are still suffering from, change fatigue. I mean, even, Dots Gaming, if you follow him on YouTube or Twitch, even he was like, this is like too much change in one go. And it gives him like flashbacks from the past year of the constant, every 3 months there's a new change. Everyone's got to change up their builds. Everyone's got to change up their skills. So within the context of the bad performance ESO is going through right now, and the change fatigue, this was not a very good time to introduce these. I mean, even if it was introduced at a much better time, I think there would have still been a lot of feedback given over the fact that it just changed so much stuff, and the fact that it wouldn't have helped a lot of players anyway. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that. I think honestly the biggest rework they could do that would be well received is not just light attacks and heavy attacks, but also champion points. Where have champions points been? I mean, we've been asking about champion points, right, for the past 2 years now, going on to 3. So I mean they even sort of put a champion point rework in here, but for tenacity. And I don't blame them for not really telling us that they're gonna tackle on champion points, because like I wouldn't know where to start with these champion points. Like they're just so ingrained into the game, and it's gonna be really complicated to handle. So I don't blame them at all for not tackling this yet, while they have a whole bunch of other shit to deal with. But overall, I think the off-cycle PTS and the fact that they hope to have more off-cycle PTS tests like this in the future, and the fact that they said, oh, we learned a lot, and we want a chance for you guys to talk to us, basically to give us feedback early in the developmental process before development-wise we push shit to the PTS and we can't really change much there, if that's what they're saying. I think that's great. I think this is a really great step towards some transparency between the community, the player base, and the devs. I think if this is their if this is how they're going to go about it, and they tell us, okay, here's our vision for the game, here are our proposed changes, what do you guys think? They can take that feedback and do whatever they want with it, and listen to it or whatever. I think that's fantastic. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you guys like the fact that they did not go through with the light attack and heavy attack changes? Did you like the light attack and heavy attack changes? Or do you just not care? Let me know. And thanks for watching. If you want to support my content creation, just subscribe to my YouTube or just check me out on Twitch. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time, whether it's on, a YouTube comment section or Discord or Twitch. And stay safe and healthy, guys.